It's no secret that Japanese companies know how to make a good engine, and many of their greatest come in the form of a big and loud V8. Now, there have been plenty of incredible Japanese V8s, but one of them has to be the best. Therefore, we're going to rank every production road legal Japanese V8 in a tier list format to find out which of them comes out on top. Let's get started. Toyota's first ever V8 engine was known as the V, a 90-degree pushrod V8 with hemispherical heads, a very innovative design for the 1960s. The V engine was also quite lightweight, made from entirely aluminum alloys rather than cast iron or steel, which was more common for the era. Each of the V engines had a rather narrow application, with this one only being found in one model. The original V engine was a solid foundation to build upon, but made really low quantities of power compared to its succeeding counterparts. The V will start us off in the upper C tier. The Toyota 3V came next in line and is best known for its application in the original Toyota Century, a car that would eventually become popular for the utilization of a V12 engine. Although larger and more powerful than the original iteration, the 3V wasn't entirely without issue. From what I can find, this engine seemed to be the most prone to oil leaks, which is a rather serious problem and eventually can lead to all-out engine failure. The late 60s Centuries are undeniably good cars, but compared to what is yet to come, such reliability concern is worth the D tier. The 4V engine is still reported to experience oil leaks, although far less frequently. It can also see timing belt failures on occasion, but on the bright side, the 4V makes a fair bit more power than its smaller relatives and packs much more torque. So I would say the 4V is worth the C tier. The last, and likely the best of the V engine series, the 5V was the last V8 engine that was used in the Toyota Century for nearly 2 decades. Seemingly the most reliable, it also happens to be the biggest and most powerful of the series. Although many will steer you towards a V12 Century if you're looking at one, the 5V engine makes the mid-90s variations of steel, with reliable power production and a smooth torque curve. I think the 5V belongs as our first entry to the A tier. Toyota's next V8 engine series was known as the UZ series, and the 1UZ was the first and also the most well-known. The UZ series retained a 90-degree bank angle, but ditched nearly everything else. The carburetors were swapped for fuel injection, the pushrod set up for dual overhead cams. The later 1UZ models even received variable valve timing, making these engines ultra efficient due to high airflow capability. The 1UZ engine hit the 300 horsepower mark and could hold up to abuse well thanks to its steel connecting rods. As a whole, the 1UZ was a phenomenal piece of engineering, and it ended up being called one of the best engines ever by some, and with good reason. The 1UZ will be entering the S tier. The next engine in Toyota's UZ line was the 2UZ, which saw entirely different applications from the 1UZ. The 2UZ was meant for larger vehicles and thus used a cast iron block and aluminum heads instead. The result of this was a heavier engine that made less power but more torque. These engines have become well known for their performance, although with a few reliability issues such as cracking headers or broken water pumps. Overall, the 2UZ is quite different from its superb predecessor, but still of respectable quality. I think the 2UZ should go into the B tier. The last of the UZ engines, the 3UZ, diverged in design yet again. Using a fully aluminum block and heads, these engines were meant to be lightweight for performance applications. In fact, the 3UZ was even found in a Super GT race car, albeit with a few modifications. All variants had variable valve timing and were extremely efficient in terms of low airflow restriction. The 3UZ was a proper wrap-up to one of Toyota's greatest engine series, and I would say that the 3UZ is well deserving of the A tier. The UR V8 engine series took everything that was great about the UZ series and built upon it. The 1UR was the first of these and retained an all-aluminum construction for weight saving, along with the high airflow variable valve timing cam setup. The 1UR is the least powerful of the series and is also known to experience oil consumption issues. The formula deployed in the creation of this engine was surely one that could produce great success, but isn't best displayed in the 1UR itself. That being said, these engines are still highly reliable and are worth the upper B tier. The 2UR is probably my favorite engine in this video, and for good reason. Found in most Lexus high-end performance cars, this engine makes incredible power with little to no reliability concern. Such strong internals allow for a relatively high 7300 RPM redline, at which the 2UR makes a very unique and engaging sound. This 5-liter engine has done loads to increase the Lexus brand recognition in the performance car world, and is interestingly the same engine that dethroned the V12 in the Toyota Century. It's hard to find anything wrong with the 2UR, even when searching forums for complaints. Thus, the 2UR will be going into the S tier. I like to think of the 3UR like the 2UZ of this engine series in that it was meant for larger vehicle applications and therefore had a big displacement and sacrificed horsepower for torque. Although the 3UR isn't super powerful in most variations, Toyota actually created an aftermarket supercharger that can be fitted to the 3UR, boosting it all the way to 504 horsepower. Like the 1UR, the 3UR also consumes oil, but has also been known to leak it. The 3UR was a respectable way to wrap up a great engine series and should be right around the low A tier. The last of the Toyota V8s covered here, the 1VD is the sole diesel V8 from Toyota and is still produced to this very day. It can be had with either 1 or 2 turbochargers and is only found in a select few countries. One major application exists for the 1VD, being a select few Land Cruiser diesel variants. These engines are quite reliable, but are somewhat lacking in performance, and they're certainly quite hard to find. Seeing as there isn't anything amazing about the 1VD, but also nothing horribly wrong, a ranking around the B tier would be the most appropriate. Getting on to the Nissan V8 engines, the first of them came over 3 decades after the company's inception. Like most engines of the time, the Y40 and adjacent Y44 were pushrod V8s that were fed with mechanical carbureted fueling. Although it is hard to speak on the reliability because so few of these engines were created, their performance is astounding. Made at the same time as Toyota's V engine, the Y40 produced nearly double the power figures. It's worth noting that this is largely a function of its far bigger displacement, but it is impressive nonetheless. This duo of V8 engines was a great start to Nissan's V8 production and deserves the upper B tier. The W64 engine was Nissan's next V8, but there are only 8 of them in existence. With such rarity, there is far too little information to make an accurate conclusion, so take the rest of this with a grain of salt. The W64 had a massive 6.4 liter displacement and only had one unique application in the form of an executive limousine. My suspicion is that such low power out of an engine of this size is due to the prioritization of torque production. However, there is no existing information on how much torque the W64 makes. As a whole, the W64 is a cool concept with an intriguing application and history, but is seemingly inefficient and likely not mass-produced with a reason. Take this one lightly, but the W64 will sit in the C tier for now. The VH45 is what arrived after a roughly 25-year hiatus from V8 production. An entirely new design, the VH series used full aluminum construction with forged steel internals. The result of this is astounding reliability, with many building these engines to hold 1,000 horsepower. The figures displayed are likely sandbagged, as the VH45 was created during a time when Japanese manufacturers agreed not to exceed 276 horsepower. The VH engine line also received Nissan's version of variable valve timing, and the VH45 is a great engine worthy of the A tier. The smaller VH engine came later on in the form of the VH41, which had a 4.1 liter displacement rather than 4.5 liters. Much of the design remained, but the timing chain was swapped to correct a known issue from the VH45, and the pistons on the VH41 are smaller and weaker. The crankshaft of the VH41 is also weaker than the VH45, with the connecting rods similar in strength. Interestingly, many of these parts are interchangeable between engines with mild modification, but it's safe to say that the VH45 has better internals. Thus, although still a solid engine, the VH41 will go right below its larger counterpart in the B tier. Nissan's succeeding VK engine series is widely known as their best V8 offerings. The first and smallest of these was the VK45 engine, which is a full aluminum construction with incredibly strong internals composed entirely of forged steel. The valve train was also bulletproof with titanium valves and variable timing cams. Due to the strength and capability of the VK45, it found itself in many racing applications, including the Super GT, GTR, and LMP2 cars that are found in the World Endurance Championship. The VK45 did a lot to boost the Infiniti brand as well, and was incredibly well received. Overall, between its bulletproof construction and impressive application, the VK45 belongs in the S tier. The larger 5-liter VK50 is the least powerful of the 3 VK engines, but equally reliable. It also sees racing application in the form of LMP3 endurance prototypes, and the applications in road-going vehicles are much narrower, making the VK50 also the least popular of the series. It also introduced variable valve lift, a new feature at the time. By design, it is still a great engine, but lacks the wide usage and bulletproof reputation of the VK45, and as a result should belong in the high A tier. The biggest and most powerful, the VK56 is the final VK engine. It too was seen in racing with both LMP3 and GT1 applications, of which it has had a very successful history in. It's worth mentioning that the power output is far lower in road usages opposed to racing variations. Furthermore, the VK56 introduced iron cylinder lining to make the power plant even more robust. The VK56 still retains the variable valve lift system in some variants and is all around the most technologically advanced of the series. These engines also have become quite popular in the world of aftermarket modification, and with good reason. It's hard to find anyone with complaints about the VK56, and all things considered, it will join its smaller predecessor in the S tier. Mitsubishi only ever built one V8 engine. This engine was once again all aluminum and a reasonable 4.5 liters in displacement. The power output is hard to truly know, as the 8A80 was produced in the era where 276 horsepower was not to be exceeded. Mitsubishi's GDI fuel injection system was also featured, but is widely known as a system prone to repeated failures. The 8A80 interestingly had a primary application in the rare Hyundai Equus, opposed to Mitsubishi's own vehicles. I find these engines intriguing, but it would be a disservice to something like the VH41 to put it in B tier, so I'll have to put the 8A80 in the C tier. The final engine I'll be covering in this video is Isuzu's sole 8PA1 V8. This is a rather strange engine and only used in large working trucks and found in a 10-liter diesel format. Considering its application, torque production would be quite important, and the APA1 makes loads of it. From the small amount of information on the APA1 that I could find, it seems these things are nearly indestructible and will last forever while taking an absolute beating. For how well this engine fits its applications, it's definitely worth around the B tier. So that's going to wrap up my full Japanese V8 tier list. You might wonder where Honda was, but all of their V8 engines were used only in racing applications, but hey, that could be a future video. I hope you enjoyed this installment to the series, which will be continuing, so please make sure to hit the subscribe button on the screen now to stay tuned for the next one. Also, be sure to let me know what you would change or what I may have missed. Thank you for watching and have a great day.